Today we're going to be talking about ventilating your Crested Gecko tubs and enclosures because it's very important to have ventilation on the tub. If you don't have a way for air to circulate through the tub, you're going to have issues of mold and it's just not going to be good. It's going to be kind of like, what's the word? Stuffy. You want airflow, right? It's good for you to sometimes open up your windows, right? This is the window for your Crested Gecko, but we don't want the Crested Gecko to be able to get out of the window. So we put screen there. Let's start with level 1, which is the simplest, and this is how I started out. All that you do is you cut some ventilation. You can either use fiberglass ventilation or you can use stainless steel ventilation. I actually, still currently, until pretty much now, have been using the fiberglass mesh on all of my tall narrows and my largest size for my geckos. So for my large 12 by 12 by 18 adult enclosures, those all have the fiberglass mesh. The only reason that I started using the stainless steel mesh as well was for the 6-quart tubs, because when you feed the little babies and juveniles in the 6 quarts, whenever you feed off insects, crickets, or red runner roaches or whatever, the roaches and crickets will actually be able to chew through the mesh and make a hole where they can escape if you use the fiberglass mesh. So if you go with the stainless steel mesh, then they can't crawl through. Who would have known? So I would personally recommend, if you have a bunch of 6 quarts that you're trying to ventilate, go with the stainless steel. Then all that you do is cut a little square or a circle, put it over it, and then use a hot glue gun and hot glue it on. It's really sturdy. It's almost impossible to break out. This is an old tub that I don't use anymore, but I still have it around in case I run out or I need a clean tub. And it works really well. The hot glue is very resilient. It's stretchy and it's really it has a good bond. So I've had no issues with this. The downside to having it on specifically like these 6-quart tubs, using the stainless steel mesh so that the roaches can't chew through it, sometimes whenever me or an employee was pulling out the tub, sometimes these little tiny parts coming off of the stainless steel mesh, they'd get right under your fingernail and you'd actually bleed. It pokes you. It's really painful actually when it happens, but beauty is pain. That's not the right saying. The fiberglass I've used for the tall narrows and all other sizes because I'm not really feeding my adults or my sub-adults any roaches. So I don't have to worry about the roaches being able to crawl out. Plus the actual location of the vents are higher. So the roach would have to climb, or the cricket or roach would have to climb, 4 or 5 inches of tub before they got to the actual mesh to try and chew a hole through. In 2025, 3D printers have gotten very easily accessible, much more affordable, and with a lot of creative people in the gecko world trying to come up with solutions, people have come up with solutions. What do you know? So a while ago, I had a customer called Blue Moon Geckos reach out, and they bought a couple of my XXXs from me, and I saw on their story that they had these really cool looking vents, and at the time, I only had my hot glued solution, my DIY solution. So I reached out to them and I bought a couple of their vents, and then when they sent them to me, I saw a lot of ways that they could be improved upon. For starter, the first one that they sent me was their very first model, which was a screw-on type of vent. And it was rather primitive and really bulky and just was not going to work for me. And specifically for the small ones, the very small vents that they made for the 6-quart tubs, have the cross in the middle to give the mesh that they use stainless steel mesh, to give it support. But then you can't spray through the vent, which is kind of a big deal for someone at my scale. So I said, hey, I would love to help you make this better. These are pretty high quality. I like the material. I want to help you make this better. Let's work something out here. So I had already bought the vents from them. I offered to help with the research and development for it. Their vents could be in the back of my videos. And so we came to an agreement where I was helping with the research and development in exchange for getting some free vents. But what I really like about them is that they are a total mom and pop shop type of deal. They are a small business. It's a husband and wife that are getting into breeding Crested Geckos, and this is just something that the wife does on the side. So I really wanted to find a way to help support a small business. So the next model that I helped them come up with was snapping 2 pieces together. It's much thinner. It's much easier to attach as well. And it's just a much cleaner look. What I like about these in particular is that they have a pretty wide rim on the outside, which helps if you're someone like me that's going from hot glue to some nice quality, custom 3D prints. I like that these have a bit of a rim on the outside to cover the old residue that's left over from the hot glue. Sure, I can go with Goo Gone and I can really get in there and make sure it's fully clean. We're talking about 400 plus enclosures that I'd be doing that to. So time is money, and that's just going to be really time consuming. So I like that I can just do a quick cleaning of the hot glue after I scrape it off, and this vent covers up all of the extra residue, or at least a majority of it. That might be something that's only applicable to someone like me that's going from a DIY method to a much cleaner method. But your mileage may vary. So what are the benefits of going with a 3D printed or a custom type vent over just DIY? We're pretty much only talking about cosmetics here, besides the fact that if a gecko gets food all over a vent, you can then take it off, wash it, and then put it back, which is something that you can't do when you just hot glue and DIY, which is kind of something that I'm dealing with right now. Quite a few of my enclosures have either gecko poop stains on them, or they have food that's built up from the geckos getting their foot in the food, walking on the vent, things like that. So it makes cleaning that harder. You have to scrub it and try to work with that. Having an actual detachable vent that's an all-in-one kind of thing does make cleaning a little bit easier. Now, the main benefit to going with someone like Blue Moon Geckos here is that they can do fully custom 3D printed vents. So of course, it doesn't help that I have kind of like an all black theme. So for me, I just said, I want all matte black. And they said, do you want any text on it? And I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. And they showed me their vents where they have custom font and stickers and they do all this. So they're like the whole shebang. But for me, I don't really care about having a bunch of micro branding on hundreds of different tubs that are in the background. And even if I toss around the idea, but doing that custom black, custom text to say Robbie's Reptiles was just gonna be in black, and it's just gonna be blurred out in the videos in the background, and I was like, whatever, I don't really need it. But if you're like a small scale or medium scale breeder that wants fully custom 3D printed vents, they can make you these in whatever colors you want. So that's kind of the main benefit. So if you want all of your 3D printed vents to be bright teal or hot pink or neon green, they can do that for you. So they're in the business of fully customizable vents. So for my specific use case, what I wanted was all matte black everything, because as you can tell, I've got a theme going on. But we went with a black mesh as well, which actually we did some tests with light meters. Black mesh actually lets in more light into the enclosure. The light is being absorbed rather than reflected. I'm sure there's someone in the comments that can do a bunch of science and point out how that works. And because I'm using the bioactive setup that I made a video on already, if you haven't seen it, maybe I'll put it up there if I get around to it. What I did is I did 4-inch holes, and then I had them convert the vent into a 3-inch vent. So there's a bit more wall than there really needs to be, but for me specifically, I can get away with only spraying twice a week in this facility, which is great for me specifically. But the problem is, for my bioactive setups and all of these, the moss does dry up in between the two sprays. So I am having to frequently refill and re-up my isopod inventory. So I would love to be able to have a little bit less ventilation so that all of my bioactive setups can hold on to just a little bit more humidity for me to not have to spray 3 times or 4 times a week and continue with my 2 times spraying a week. Because the geckos in my facility are doing just fine with 2 sprays a week, so I don't want to have to add in a 3rd day of spraying just to compensate for the isopods when all of my geckos are doing fine. The geckos are the priority here. So I thought, okay, maybe I can turn all of my 4-inch vents into 3-inch ones. I also had them make 6-inch vents for me to test out, and those I had them do 6-inch and convert to 4-inch vents so that the larger adult tubs hold in just a little bit more humidity long term. So again, with them, we're talking full customizability. You want your specific color, you want your specific vent holes, whatever the humidity situation is in your facility, you tell them what you want and they can do it for you. Another thing to touch on, the build quality of these specifically I found are really good. Like I can full on ninja star that at the ground and look, there is no damage to it. So the build quality I found is really good. These aren't made of PLA, these are made of PETG. PETG is much more structural. It's also much more difficult to print. Turns out I did a little bit of Googling. PETG is a lot more difficult to print with than PLA. PLA, like anytime you go to the reptile shows, you see some people set up at the tables with like the garbage 3D print toys or whatever. 99% of the time they're using PLA silk, which is just something that's shiny and gets little kids' attention. PETG is what you print with if you're trying to like replace a car part or you're trying to like build something for real structural integrity. PETG is the good stuff. If this was made out of PLA and I shipped to Arizona, there's a good chance that in the drive between here and Arizona that they'd be in a car without AC and it gets really hot in Arizona, like 110 degrees. And in just that heat, it would actually make the material start to warp and deform. And I also can't really deform this much. They also sent me an updated model of their 2-inch vent, and these are relatively thin, and they're able to just snap on together. In terms of different vents that I've tested out, these are the easiest to attach, I will say. But let's talk about the negatives when it comes to these 3D printed vents. I wish that they were able to come up with a better solution for the smaller 6-quart vents to not have the cross. Because the problem with using these that I found, which they're still making iterations on these currently. These are months old at this point, so I'm sure they've already come up with solutions, or they're going to continue to come up with other solutions. What I wish that I could have with these is no cross in the middle, and that's what they've done with this. But the problem is, after a few months of testing this model, an issue that I found was from me just pressing the sprayer up to the vent and spraying through the tub, that eventually the actual screen comes undone, and then I'm able to break through it. And that's just because of the way that they're actually building it. Again, they're coming up with new ways to do this. They're making new models, but that's the benefit of having the cross. And that's why on the bigger sizes, they have the T or the cross, because that's giving extra support to the mesh. They're just using standard mesh, and they're gluing it in or pressing it in place. So not having the cross leads to this weakness. That's one thing that I wish that there was a way to come up with a better version for this. When it comes to the bigger sizes, I found that the cross isn't really that big of a deal, and the only downside really is that when I'm spraying, I have to specifically aim a little bit. Compared to my other ones that I've just hot glued in, I can just, I don't have to think about it. I can do it with one hand. I don't have to aim. You're able to spray in one quadrant and then move over really quick, and it's not really that big of a, splash zone, if you will. And the mesh that they've actually gone with, I found water goes through it very well for me specifically. I have found in all this testing that I've done, it ends up becoming hyper dependent on your sprayer, the pressure that you're spraying it with, and the width that you have the sprayer set to, as well as the actual material that you're spraying through. So I'm not going to hold it against any of the vents or the methods that we're talking about today, because I think it's just a little bit too specific. You need to find your settings that work for you. I'm thoroughly impressed with how durable these are and how easy they are to attach and take off. One negative that I will also point out is that the actual part of the vent that is going to be in the enclosure is really rough around the edges. There's a lot of the 3D printing lines that you can see. There's a lot of literal rough edges. Granted, I've had these on for the past like 4 months now, and it's not really that big of a deal. Again, what's great about these is if they get dirty, you can just pop them off, soak them in water for a little bit, shake it around, and all the Gecko stuff will come off. So not that big of a deal, but I do wish that the interior was more so a reflection of the exterior of the vent. I think that would be a much cleaner look. All in all, if you want fully customized vents with either custom stickers, custom text, and all custom colors and size, they can come up with a solution for you. Now let's talk about what might be the end-all, be-all to ventilation. Funnily enough, while I was working with Blue Moon Geckos developing these vents, AJ from AJD Reptiles hit me up and said, hey, I want to send you some of my vents for review. I've developed these new vents. I think they're going to be the best vents. So we hopped on a call. He explained to me all the different details that he took into consideration and just everything that he had been doing, and I just laughed to myself. While I was trying to work with some customers of mine on these fully custom 3D print vents, I thought these were so cool. AJ just comes out of nowhere, of course, a friend of mine, and is like, hey, I've got like the pinnacle, the end-all, be-all to vents. Here's all the detail. Anyway, it was just kind of funny timing. So he did send me these, and I've been testing them, and I've got some great things to say, and I also have some negative things to say. And again, a lot of this is hyper-specific to me, so take everything that I say with a grain of salt. These also were sent to me for free, so keep that in mind for this review. These are now apparently older versions. I just got off the phone with AJ, and he told me that these are now, 5 stages behind what the current model is at. It's all pretty much the same premise, but he's improved upon things that I might touch on in this video for negatives. He makes these in a 2.5-inch version, a 4-inch version, and a 6-inch version. I think the best way to put this would be someone like Blue Moon Geckos are going to be your Android, and this is your Apple when it comes to the vents. AJ has put hundreds and hundreds of hours into the R&D of these vents and focused on such nitpicky details about them to the point where some people might think it's pointless, but his goal was to make the most efficient, high quality, premium vent that you'll never have to buy again. And I think that he's accomplished that. These are very impressive in a lot of ways. So what he's made here are some vents that are impressively thin, like incredibly thin, that twist and lock together with a sort of saucer of stainless steel mesh on the inside. So this takes the benefit of being able to remove a vent to the next level. You can specifically remove the actual stainless steel dish, throw it into some vinegar water, and you can, if you buy extras, just attach another one and immediately replace, boom, put it in there. So he's made a completely modular vent. And the actual lock on this, once you get it in the tub, fully locked, it is so incredibly sturdy, it cannot be pushed out in any way. The other benefit is with the 6-quart size, the 2.5-inch version, you're able to stack the 6 quarts without having anything protrude or the vents rubbing against each other. That's how thin they are, which is a detail I didn't even take into consideration. So I was really impressed with that. On top of that, the stainless steel that's actually on these is very premium, very high quality. They will pretty much never break in regular use. And speaking of never breaking in regular use, I have actually done the Ninja Star test on these. I won't do it again because I broke one. So that is one of the negatives that I found personally, is that because the 3D printed rings are actually so thin, they are a little bit fragile. You can't completely chuck them at the ground and they won't break. But if you just casually drop it, I don't think that would cause any problems. These are also printed with PETG, which is the higher quality material. Much more difficult to print, but it leads to higher temperature resistance and better structural integrity. However, there are a few downsides that I've found to these, or some parts that I don't necessarily think are great. One of those being actually attaching them to like these tall narrows is really difficult for me. Specifically because of my nerve issues, it's also just a precarious position to be in, to flare my elbow, bend my wrist, and try to twist these and lock them together. It's a little bit painful for me, but that's a hyper-specific issue just for me. Real quick, while I was filming the B-roll after filming the talking head part, I figured out the trick to the easy vents. What you need to do is first place the inside side of the vent, then do the external side, and then you can kind of get it to match up better. Because it seems like this side, the actual internal kind of like lip or little edge is smaller, so it wiggles more and then it's harder. This one has a wider edge, so you can just boom, and it perfectly aligns with the diameter of the actual hole that the hole saw makes. Then you can get this, try to line up the grooves, and lock that puppy in. Much easier than I thought. That was user error. If you look closely, they have a notch that's supposed to be your guide so that you can see that they're lined up, and then they just twist and lock together. And man, once this is twisted and locked onto the tub, it is never coming off. It's a really secure fit. But trying to attach it to the Like It tubs that I use, it's really precarious. It's really a noticeable amount of time to actually attach it and get them to perfectly line up. They also are not that much wider than the actual hole that you're making in the tub. So for me, I really prefer having like a wider rim on the outside of it because it's going to cover that hot glue residue, kind of like the Blue Moon vents do. But these ones specifically don't have that much of a rim, so they're not covering all that residue, so you're going to have to be much more detail oriented when you're cleaning up all that hot glue residue. If you're in my position. If you're getting brand new tubs and drilling these, then you won't have that issue. When you actually are drilling the holes in the tub, there's gonna be some like gnarled up plastic kind of poking out. You need to go back with a knife or a metal scraper of some sort and scrape off all of that gnarled edge. Otherwise, these are not gonna have a good flush fit. Once you clean it up, these are a little easier to attach. However, I still have a harder time attaching these than attaching the other ones. But then again, how often am I really going to be taking these on and off? So I'm not really going to deduct that from these, but that is something to note. When you got hundreds of tubs to do, you have to drill the hole, clean up all the edges, and make sure there isn't anything in the way. And then you got to do the whole weird twisting motion, make sure they're perfectly locked in. That's why I do prefer the way that these attach. I wish that there was a way that we could just snap two things together. That would be great. Or better yet, no one's made this yet, and you guys feel free to take my idea. Make it so that here's the tub, here's a vent, all that you have to do is push and it just pops into place. That would be my 2 cents. I would love to see a vent that you can just pop and it locks into place. Probably like a little tiny lip on the inside that just snaps right into place. That I think would be like S tier, top level, the best of the best type of method. Then you can just pull it off whenever you're ready. Now, the reason that I say that these are kind of like the Apple of gecko vents is because, you know, Android phones, they let you fully customize. You can move the apps wherever you want. It's up to you. It's your customizable experience. And when you have an Apple phone, they decide how you should use your phone because they know what's right? And they kind of are like, this is the best way to use the phone. We want you to use it this way. This is, you know, it's a much more like they engineered the whole experience. And the reason I say that is because these are the only sizes that they have them in and will have them in. So if you have 2-inch holes, like most of my 6 quarts do, I have to go back and re-drill holes for 2.5-inch because they only have it in a 2.5-inch size. So if you're like me and have a more unique situation where you're doing the bioactive setup and you found that the 4-inch maybe just is a little bit too much ventilation, so you want to make it to a 3-inch diameter instead of a 4-inch, so that you can hold in more humidity, or you have a 6-inch vent and you want it to go to a 4-inch vent to hold in that humidity for your bioactive setup. That's not what this is. You get the 6-inch, the 4-inch, and the 2.5-inch. That's what you get. So it's not fully customizable, which of course makes sense. The scale that AJ is operating at, it's not financially viable, and it doesn't make sense to offer fully customizable everything. He has made what he has found to be the most efficient, high quality product, and that's what you're going to buy. And I'm pretty much going to be switching over to these. I personally am going to be using AJ's vents for all of my 6 quarts and for my large like-its, and I'm going to be using the Blue Moons for all of these tall narrows that I have that are the 4-inch converted to a 3-inch. But the benefit to using these on the 6-quart tubs far outweighs for me any sort of customizability. The ability to have a absolutely secure fit on here and to be able to stack all of my 6-quart tubs, no problem, nothing rubbing against each other, that pays for itself for me. That is incredible. It's honestly a feat of engineering how AJ was able to come up with a vent like this. The last negative that I have of the Easy Vents is I can't see into the tubs very well. It's almost like I'm being flashbanged, honestly, when I look and try to see into my tubs. The stainless steel is so reflective and it's so thick compared to the normal stainless steel that I've been using that I cannot see through into my adult tubs or my juvenile tubs. So I do wish that I could see into the tubs easier because I don't want to have to open up the tub to glance at a gecko or, oh, I see a gecko's out. I like being able to see into the tub. However, AJ has reassured me that there is a solution in the works. I guess a last honorable mention for different vents that you can use is like on VentMaster or VentMaster Pro, I forgot. They do like these metal tabs, and those I'm not a fan of. They really hurt to install after you've installed a couple. The Hatchling tubs that I use, I have 1-inch vents from them, and it is a pain to get those on. So I would love to see someone make a better version of that. That'd be awesome. There's really no right or wrong answer when it comes to this. If you don't really mind how hot gluing some screen to your tubs looks, then that's the cheapest and probably best solution for you. If you have a smaller scale collection and you want a more customized look to all of your tubs, then go with someone like Blue Moon Geckos. I think they make a pretty high quality product, and their customizability, you know, that's the selling point, is that you can have it fully customized to your colors and your specifications. I think that's awesome. And if you're a large scale breeder that doesn't want to have to think about it, you just want the highest quality, most efficient vent that you can get, then the Easy Vents are for you.